This man needs no introduction. He has become the source of Tesla knowledge, sharing his thoughts, his opinions, his information with the community for over 5 years on his highly respected podcast, Ride the Lightning, the Tesla Unofficial podcast. Ryan has been so lucky to even sit down with Tesla's chief designer, Franz von Holzhausen, and as well, the man, the legend himself, Tesla CEO, Elon Musk. So we're very grateful to have him sit down with us on this special interview. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Oh, always happy to be here. You mentioned I got the card-carrying member. There's my card right there.
There you go.
You've got one too. Everybody's got one. But yeah, no, you guys are very kind to have me. I mean, I'm out there just at the events with you guys. It's so it feels a little weird to be now made like I'm not any special deal. I just obsessively make a thing every week, and I'm grateful that anybody listens to it and enjoys it.
Yeah, it's come a long way. I actually was just listening. I went all the way back to listen to episode 1, just to see where it all began, because
Yes.
I'm one of those who kind of came in at the middle, and I think there have been people who have started kind of all over through this journey.
Sure.
But you've come a long way. Where were you always like a big car guy?
Yeah, it's funny. I can genuinely, honestly say I've been a car guy my whole life. When I was a little kid, I'm originally from New Jersey, and my dad would, my memory is he would bring me home like a Hot Wheels or Matchbox toy car like every day when he came from work. But realistically, like I'm sure that's probably what it seemed like to my kid brain. I'm sure it was like once a week, twice a month, something like that. Maybe every time, every payday. I don't know. But I amassed this big hope chest full of Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars. And as a kid, I could always, we'd be going somewhere in our family car, and I could identify the make and model of every single car. Like I just always was tuned into cars, and my parents was like, what? How do you know that? That's weird. But yeah, I always loved cars. It's been a thing for me my whole life. And as I've learned now, as I've gotten older, I seem to be especially drawn to the most iconoclastic car and out in left field cars possible, and car companies, which I'm sure you're gonna segue to this. But I had a DeLorean for 12 years. That was my dream car as a kid when I saw Back to the Future. And I could go through this more later if you like. But I fell in love with Tesla and found that they're obviously all completely coincidental, but there are bizarre similarities between Tesla and DeLorean, other than, of course, the big one being one succeeded and one failed. But yeah, it's I've been a car guy my whole life, absolutely, and I'm so lucky that this is now the second dream car I've owned in my life. A lot of car people, I won't say car guys, car people. A lot of car people aren't lucky enough to get to own their one dream car. I've now had 2, so it's I can't complain. It's been a good run.
Well, where did it all begin? Like, what was your first car that you owned?
First car I had was my grandfather's. I hand me down from him. We bought it was a 1987 Nissan Pathfinder. So just completely nothing special, but it had had I think under 100,000 miles. It ran great, and look, it was, and this was, let's see, that was an 87 model and I got it in 1997, yeah, I think like 97 or so. So it's like 10 years old at the time, and that thing served me well. Took it to college with me for the first year, but I quickly plotted to get the DeLorean, and ended up having. Funny enough, that first car is the car that I've owned for the least amount of time. I only had it for a year.
Wow.
I've had a total of 4 cars. The Model 3 is my 4th car. I mean, obviously still working on the Model 3, but yeah, the Pathfinder was the one I had for the least amount of time.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think there was a recent Tesla or Twitter kind of poll, which was just looking at what people owned before. And it's just very eye-opening to see. I think for those that don't know, obviously your car before was quite unique. So let's touch on that, right? You talked about a DeLorean. So those of you who don't know the DeLorean, tell us, where did that fascination come from?
Yeah,
and how you actually got to it?
Yeah, it's when I saw Back to the Future, I was the right age as a kid. I guess I was 5 or 6 when Back to the Future came out because I just turned 40. So, um, and I love the movie, but that's as a kid, that car, it was just in the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. I mean, the gullwing doors and a stainless steel body with no paint on it, and just this cool wedge design, and it was just amazing. And even of course by then, but by the time the movie had come out, the company was already dead. So it's like, what is this? What is this? And and it kind of just, I was a kid, so that it just kind of buried itself in my subconscious for years until
Yeah.
I got my driver's license when I was 16. And then, I was lucky. I get this hand-me-down car from my grandfather, the Pathfinder. But then I start thinking, well, let me look up, what about the DeLorean? Like, what's the deal with that? So I just started doing research on it. And, 96, 97 was the early days of the internet. There was an internet, like a public internet, but it wasn't like there wasn't just a Wikipedia for everything at that point in time. And I joined a DeLorean owners group, a mailing list, like an online mailing list, because that's, there weren't forums or Reddit or anything like that at that point in time. And I just started to learn more about them. I was like, and they just, the values of them were low at that point, because it was just this orphan car with a Volvo engine that was underpowered, that didn't sell, that was, yes, made famous by this movie. But there were, in the sort of collector car sense, there were too many DeLoreans. They built about 9,000 DeLoreans from 1981 model year, which actually was in 1981, through, then there were some 1983 model years at the end. But really, it was 81, and then the company went under during the 82 model year, and the 83s were actually just half assembled 82s that were then like finished up with the parts they had after the company had gone under, and this consolidation company came in and acquired all the assets and just put as many cars together and sold them to, get as much money as they could out of their investment. So, 9,000 DeLoreans, which, doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, hey, but looking at even the original Tesla Roadster, 2,500 cars. So there are almost 4 times as many DeLoreans made as original Tesla Roadsters. So in that collector car sense, there were a lot of DeLoreans, and the whole thing I'm driving at here in a very long-winded way is to say that, there was really no rarity to the DeLorean in the collector car sense. If you wanted one, you could find one and get one fairly cheap. So I was lucky I always got good grades, and I got a full ride scholarship to college. And so since I didn't have any student loans or any of that kind of thing, I somehow hoodwinked my parents into co-signing a loan to buy a DeLorean. Amazing. And because again, it was relatively affordable. It was something that could be done. I mean, I guess I don't know why I paid $16,000 for the DeLorean. And at the time,
wow.
The values have just slowly, steadily gone up since, but they're still, a good one now is 40, a real nice one's 50. So they're not like these crazy $1 million cars. And so, yeah. And then that was my car. I had a DeLorean for 12 years. I did buy, after I started my career up here in the Bay Area and moved up to the Bay Area, when I guess I bought my first new car at whatever it was, 25 years old. That was it was an Infiniti G35 coupe, which I really enjoyed. So I did have both of them for a while. Sold the DeLorean when I was married, and we had our daughter, and we were lucky enough with the help of my in-laws to get into our house in San Francisco. And it was a tearful goodbye with the DeLorean, but it was just one of those, for the best of the family things. And,
right.
My wife, she didn't really kind of get it with cars, and it wasn't a thing I wanted to turn into an issue. So I had it for, although that I say that not to like throw her under the bus, but we can come back around to that later, because her tune has changed a lot as she's seen what's happened with me in the Tesla world over these last 5 years. But so yeah, I said goodbye to the DeLorean, but I had my childhood dream car for my entire 20s, because I got it when I was 19, sold it when I was 31. And it's like, not a lot of people, like, that's an amazing thing that I can, it was just so much fun. It was such a privilege and a joy for that. And so yeah, that's the real nutshell version of my DeLorean story. But it's not a perfect car.
You can't be upset.
It never was. It never will be a perfect car. But I'll tell you, there is just nothing like a DeLorean. Like, the thing that was fun about the DeLorean, I mean, I owned it because I loved it. I didn't own it for attention. I wasn't looking to be like the cool kid on the block. I mean, it's a nerd car. It's car guys aren't drawn to DeLoreans. Nerds and people that love Back to the Future are drawn to DeLoreans. But what was extra, a fun side effect of owning a DeLorean was I loved it. But every time I took that car out, whether it was on the road or to the gas station or wherever I'm going, there would always be people that would be like giving me the thumbs up because they either remember the car or they remember the movie. So it was this, it never got the sort of like exotic car, like turn your nose up, like, oh, F that rich guy. Like, no, it was never, it was just, people would see that car and just, it would bring them joy, even if just for a moment. So I love that car. There will always be a place in my heart for that car.
Yeah. And you got a great 12 years with it too. Yes. So that's awesome. So segueing from that, right now we're in the Tesla world. Do you remember, or can you go back to that moment of your first Tesla experience? What started the whole Tesla flame?
So the answer to that is both yes and no. I don't actually remember how I got made aware of Tesla. I don't remember seeing an article or, obviously there were no TV commercials, anything like that. So I don't quite remember where my first awareness of it came from. But at some point I became aware of this startup car company here in the Bay Area that was building an electric sports car, an electric, at the time, really supercar. I was like, that's interesting. And so I started digging into it a little more, and okay, this is cool. And I still had the DeLorean at that point. So this is 2009. The Roadster started production in 2008. Of course, the company was founded in 2003. I've lived here in the Bay Area since 2002. I had zero awareness of Tesla. I didn't know they existed until 2009. And so as I started learning more about Tesla, I started seeing these bizarre, again, completely coincidental parallels to DeLorean. They were both startup American car companies that were safety minded, run by a larger than life CEO, John DeLorean. If you are old enough or have kind of maybe seen, there've actually been a couple of documentaries about John DeLorean. DeLorean was Elon-like in a lot of ways. And they were both, they both made sports cars that were partnered with Lotus. Of course, Lotus did the chassis and the gliders for the Tesla Roadster, and they did the suspension engineering on the DeLorean. And the DeLoreans were also built. They weren't built by Lotus the way the Roadsters were, but they were built over in the UK. So just all these sort of strange little bizarre. I was like, this is kind of interesting. So I reached out to Tesla two employees responded and I said, hey, I coordinate the local DeLorean club, the Northern California DeLorean Club. We would love to have a club event down there and just check out the showroom and maybe, check out the Roadster. And to their credit, I mean, if I had, to this day, like if I had done that, if I'd reached out to the Ferrari dealership or the Lamborghini dealership, they would have hung up the phone. They would never would happen. But here was Tesla in startup mode, needing to get awareness out. And, they graciously agreed to have this club show up and there were 17 DeLoreans that showed up to that event, which that was the most we ever had for any event. Usually we'd get like 8 to 10 cars for a DeLorean event.
Mhm.
With 17 DeLoreans. And they gave us a tour of not only, of course, the showroom where there were roadsters, but they took us to, there was a separate back building where the public wasn't allowed. You couldn't walk, if you were looking to go buy a roadster, you couldn't walk into that building, but they brought us back there. And it was this little like garage size space where the gliders would come in from Lotus, and then the battery packs would come in from Japan. And that's where they would mate the batteries and the PEM systems into the, basically finish the cars. And they had a whiteboard with like, okay, this VIN and where's it, what's its status and where's it going? And so they showed us the cool back building where they would actually do the final assembly on the cars. And they were just so gracious. They were incredibly gracious. And so I emailed them the next day to just give them a thank you. And they wrote, one of the guys, his name was Michael. He writes back and he says, "You want to come take a test drive of the Roadster?" And I was, well, sure, that sounds great. I've never driven anything like that before. And he took me out. We went up Sand Hill Road and we went to 280, and he's egging me on. Like I've never driven anything close to that expensive. Like, again, the DeLorean is not an expensive car. And he's egging me on. He's like, "Go ahead, hit it. Let's go." Like through the clover leaf on the on-ramp. And okay. So just, and it's just like everybody else's Tesla story. The first time you drive it, it just clicks. You're like, wow, I get it.
Yeah.
Instant torque. Holy crap. This is amazing. Of course, the Roadster too, it's your down low to the ground, and you got the open top, and it's this awesome experience. And from that moment on, that's when I went down the rabbit hole and became obsessed. And it took a few years. Well, that took more than a few years. It took a while after that, but eventually that's how I eventually got to the podcast. Was like, okay, I'm following this company religiously now, the Model S.
Yep.
And then, Blue Star, which was the code name for Model 3 way back in the day, part of the secret master plan. Like I'm going to get that because that's what I can afford.
Yeah.
And I followed it so religiously until eventually deciding, all right, I'm going to start a podcast about this because my wife's sick of hearing about it all the time. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah, and it's a perfect segue. That was where we were going next. Is that now you've had the podcast since 2015, and yet your love came a lot earlier than that. So at what point did it hit where you're like, I need to make a podcast, and why? Like what compelled you to make the Ride the Lightning podcast?
So I really wasn't joking when I said my wife was sick of hearing about it, because I would talk about it all the time and be like, every little Model S update, they'd be like, oh, okay, the signature version's coming out, and it's every little thing I would just be in her ear, and she just got tired. Like, and I say it with complete love. It's not like she was mean about it or anything, but I just I could tell that she was just sort of exasperated by it. And I am very fortunate. My day job, I've spent my entire career. I work in games media, so I cover the world of video games. And as part of that, I'd been doing video game themed podcasts for years already. I started doing those in 2006. So I'd been doing those for a while, and I always loved radio. I probably would have gone into radio or tried to, had I not lucked out and gotten the dream job of working at a video game magazine and now a video game website. But so I'd always loved radio, and podcasting let me kind of scratch that itch in that amateur way. I don't claim to be like a professional radio guy, but so I was already comfortable with podcasting. I was familiar with how to do it. Like, okay, I need, microphone and the software and the hosting service. And I knew, it was a natural, easy thing for me. So I thought, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to start a Tesla podcast, but there've got to be a million Tesla podcasts because there's a million podcasts for anything. So I'm at dinner with my wife one night. We'd gotten a babysitter. We went out to one of our favorite restaurants, 54 Mint in San Francisco. When the pandemic blows over, If you need a wonderful Roman Italian place, 54 Mint.
Oh, check it out.
So, and I'm just, my brain's just going at this point, because that's just how my brain works. I go down that rabbit hole, and I'm like writing down names like, okay, I could call it this, I could call it that. The format could be like this maybe. And so I said, well, let me see how many other Tesla podcasts there are and see kind of what the landscape looks like. And I searched Tesla in I guess iTunes at the time, before Apple Podcasts. Nothing comes up, zero. Like that can't be right. There have to be 1,000 Tesla podcasts. No, there weren't any at that point. So I thought, well, okay, this is a chance. There's a chance to maybe find an audience here. And so I just thought about, what do I want this to look like? What do I want it to sound like? What do I want the format to be? And so in August of 2015, I just started doing it. Just started putting it out there. And I knew, well, okay, if I'm going to build an audience, I have to commit to this. I can't just do it one week and not do it the next week, or only do it when there's something super cool to talk about. Like, no, I need to commit to this. And so I did. I made sure it publishes every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, and it has for 5 years. And yeah, it's just, if I was ever going to do a podcast about a car company, a weekly podcast about a car company, I picked the right one, because as you all well know, there is always something new and interesting to talk about all the time. There is never a dull moment. I never have trouble filling an hour. So that's kind of how that came to be.
Yeah. And I think it's key what you said is that the consistency, like you have, I don't think that I can even remember. You may have missed one, but I don't think you've missed any, to be honest.
I'll give you the honest answer. So it was that first Christmas. So I'd been doing the show for 4 months. It was I think it was the week of Christmas, like the holiday week. And I thought, okay, well, you know what? I might as well just take this week off because it's a holiday. Nothing's going to be going on. Nobody's going to be expecting it. And then after that, I decided, you know what? No, I gotta make sure to keep this going no matter what. So I took 1 week off early on, but even I've actually done a couple of like bonus episodes that have kind of made up for it. Yeah. I did one all about my delivery day when I finally got my own Tesla, because as you said, I didn't have a car yet. I didn't have a Tesla when I started doing the podcast. That wasn't until year 3 of the podcast. So I did a special episode all about that. And then I did one that same fall, like aimed to be kind of a beginner's guide. Like, hey, if you're just coming into this, and that's right. It's kind of outdated now, I guess, for the most part. But yeah, other than that one holiday week in the beginning, I've literally never taken a week off, good health willing, knock on wood.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think anytime that you have, there's always been something that went live, even if it was pre-recorded. So amazing work there. As I kind of think back, right, I told you earlier, I went back and I listened to episode 1. Do you remember when you first started? What was your goal at that time to accomplish out of this podcast? Like, other than stop nagging your wife about the Tesla news, but like, what else did you hope to gain from creating this podcast?
Well, as I remember it, I may have even said this on there, because if you've listened to it recently, again, at the time, I didn't own a Tesla at that point. It was aspirational for me. And I kind of figured I was probably, a lot of the listeners who might find the podcast would be in the same boat. They'd be people, because the Model 3 didn't exist yet. They'd be people like me for whom they're really into this Tesla, but it's an aspirational thing. And so I just thought, well, maybe this podcast can be my contribution to the Tesla community, the Tesla mission, without me being able to actually own one of these and drive it around and be part of the mission that way yet. So that's honestly how I looked at it in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think, I just listened to episode 1. I think you've definitely held true to that. But in episode 1, I thought it was really shocking because you made a statement and you just laughed about it because you're like,
I
well,
think
you
I know
guys
what you're
probably
gonna
think I'm
say. Yeah,
crazy. You said, I want to interview Elon Musk.
yeah,
And it was crazy because that was in 2015.
yeah.
And we all know, and those of you who don't, Ryan had the opportunity to meet and interview Elon Musk. Um, how would you describe that moment and seeing it all like come to fruition that here you are now and where you started and then go into like, what was that like meeting Elon?
So the background is one of the reason I said that on episode 1. Somebody else had reminded me of that, like way after, like after the Elon interview had happened. Somebody said, "Oh, you actually said this on episode 1," and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty funny." I do. I interview game developers all the time at my day job. I actually have like an interview show for IGN called IGN Unfiltered. It's sort of a, think of it like an inside the actors studio kind of thing, but for game developers, where it's like, let's explore your life and career. And I really enjoy interviewing people. It's something I love doing as part of my job, and I think I've gotten pretty good at it over the years. And so that's where I thought, well, that's why on episode 1 I thought, well, yeah, I would love to apply these years of interviewing skills that I've been honing to Elon Musk. So
Yeah.
it originally came about just like everything else with Elon comes about, which is on Twitter. At some point I had I think I'd tried it a couple of times, but finally at one point it was before I got my car, because I was waiting for the performance Model 3. So it was like the spring of 2018. And I'd said something, it was some thread about, like, he had posted about something with the model. Like he responded to my question about the performance 3. And so that's when I thought, okay, well, let me see if I've still got his attention here. Let me see if I can sneak in a little plug for the podcast. And I said, oh, I'd love to have you on my Tesla podcast sometime. And he responded saying, oh, maybe when you get your car, we'll do that and we'll talk about what you like and what you don't like about it. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, he didn't straight up say, yes, I will come on your podcast. But I thought, okay, well, that's neat. And maybe nothing will ever come of it. But down the road, some months after that, Tesla reached out and it started from there. So, the people behind the scenes that take care of that stuff, I guess, I still don't know to this day if Elon said something like, yes, I would like to sit down with him, or if they pitched it to him. Oh, what about this guy that you acknowledged one time? I don't know. But however it came to be, yeah, it did take a while to set up. I think there were 2 other dates on the calendar that ended up being pushed because Elon's schedule is what it is. But eventually in May of towards the end of May of last year, 2019, it finally happened. And there I was down at the Palo Alto main, headquarters, the main office. At the end of it was specifically scheduled at the end of the day, which I was happy about, because that meant, well, maybe he'll give me a little extra time if he doesn't have any other meetings after. And yeah, it finally happened. And I'll tell you, I'm at the point where I don't get nervous for interviews because I do them all the time in my day job. But I was super nervous for Elon, mostly because
that was my next question.
because I had been warned. I'd been told to expect kind of anything with him. Like, I was told, he might, if he's just gotten some bad news in a meeting right before you, he might, it might not be the best day to do it. Or if something comes up in the middle of the meeting, like, who knows, any number of like SpaceX or Tesla thing that he might just need to like get up and go. If he just, you've all heard the stories about how Elon says, as part of Tesla culture, if you're in a meeting and it's at the point where you don't need to be there anymore, just get up and leave. I was told, well, if he decides he's kind of had enough, he'll just end it and that'll be it. So I just wasn't sure what to expect. Like, there was no guarantee that this guy was going to sit there for the whole time. and I was promised 30 minutes, even though I'd asked if repeatedly, like, can I get an hour? Because I really need an hour to
Yeah.
dig in with people, with especially somebody like him. And I'd come so prepared with 3 hours worth of questions. And I walked away. I thought I must have done something right, because we got to a point where even in my own head, I was like, I think it's been about an hour, because I wasn't going to like look at my watch
Yeah.
for an Elon interview. And sure enough, we ended up going an hour. So he was very generous with his time with me, which, I think it's not too egotistical for me to say, like, he must have enjoyed the interview on some level if he sat for, twice as long as he was officially scheduled to do. So yeah, he was really gracious with his time. And yeah, it was surreal after, because after I was like, did I suck? Like, was that bad? Was it good? Like, I don't know. It honestly wasn't until it went out into the public a few days later that when the feedback started to come in, where I felt like, okay, I did a good job. So it was sort of a weird, very surreal few days between doing the interview and putting it out.
Yeah, no, it was a great interview. I think.
Thank you.
So I think going from that, we've seen your kind of evolution into where you are today. So in the last, 5 years since you did the podcast, but even longer since you've been following Tesla, what's the excitement that keeps you wanting to do this every day? Because I think, like you said, right, the commitment that's there, and it's easy for people to just say like, oh, okay, whatever, and the market is flooded with a lot of people. It's like, what specifically for you, Ryan, is like that? It's just that's the fire.
Honestly, this is going to sound cheesy, but I promise you it's true. It's the same reason that I started doing it, which is the products. Like, as I said, I've been a car guy my whole life since I was a little kid. The whole reason the reason I started doing this, the reason I got into Tesla, the Roadster hooked me. It was like, this is a beautiful car that feels like you're in your own roller coaster. This is amazing. And then the Model S comes along, and it's stunning, and it's just the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And then the Model X, like, when the Model X comes around, and I've been a DeLorean guy, and the Model X has gull-wing doors. I'm like, no fucking way. Like, really? Like, because the X, fun fact, just I know this because I'm a DeLorean maniac and this is what I do. The Model X is the first mass production car to have gull-wing doors since the DeLorean, because the DeLorean was a mass-produced car. It just didn't last very long. Like, because you might think, well, what about the Mercedes, the AMG SLS, when they like, that was a hand-built, like, limited production car. It counts, but it doesn't count. Like, the DeLorean was so that the X was the first thing to come along. And it's like, what are the odds? What are the odds that these two cars, these two companies that I've like gone so deep down the rabbit hole with, would have this? Again, I talked about the coincidental things in common about the Lotus origins and all this. And now, like, wait, going doors. And then, of course, then it's even more hilarious when the Cybertruck rolls out and it's got a stainless steel body. I'm like, really? Like, Elon may not admit it, but he clearly respects some of the stuff that John DeLorean did, whether he's doing it consciously or not. But yeah, the answer to your question, it's the products. Like, I'm so fortunate. I got to be there when the Model 3 rolled out on stage, and like most of you, I pre-ordered that car that morning before ever seeing what it looked like.
Yep.
And then I got to be in the audience, and it rolls, and I'm like, I'm about to see the car that I've been waiting years for. And then it comes out, and it's like, yes, I love it. And and now, like, the next generation Roadster, that's a whole other insane story, of course, but that's like the stunning work of art that's gonna demolish every other sports car on the planet. And of course, and the Cybertruck being the stainless steel tank. And it's just it's the products are the thing that keep that fire burning for me. And it's like, I guess if the products ever stop exciting me, that's when I'll stop doing the podcast. But no, this
Yeah.
company is just it's one exciting, fun thing after another.
Yeah, never fails to amaze me. I agree. If you had to pick like three moments in this in your journey with Tesla that were like they were pivotal moments where you were like, yeah, that right there. Like I know you called out the cars and every time they come out with the car. So it could be a vehicle release, or it could be a software release or something that happened. What would you, I mean, whether it be like one, two, or three examples where you were like, through this evolution of Tesla, like that, those are like pivotal moments where you're like, yes, this is it.
So meaning about them, not about me, like moments about
Yeah, yeah,
Tesla. I mean, yeah, certainly well, I would say the Model S winning Motor Trend Car of the Year, because that was like you guys know
yeah.
the Model S would not have been good enough. Like that car,
True.
for it to actually change anyone's brain and change the industry, it had to be perfect. That car had to be perfect, or else Tesla probably fails. Like, that's just, that you may disagree. That's my opinion. I think that the Model S had to be the best car, although anything less wouldn't have been good enough. And it was. So for Motor Trend to do that was just such validation, and really, I think, helped move them forward in a meaningful way. And then certainly the I think the night of the Model 3 unveiling is another one, because obviously the car wouldn't come out for a while, and the $35,000 version that they promised that night wouldn't come out for even longer. But the reason I would call that one out is, if you remember that night, if you were lucky enough to be there, they had the reservation counter on the big screen on the stage after the event was over, just as the party's going. And it just kept going. And, even Elon at one point came out to address it. Like, Tesla was even shocked. Like the fact that they got to like 400,000 pre-orders on a car that wasn't coming out, like the industry had never seen that. And I think that was a really big validating moment too. And of course that changed Elon's whole way of thinking of like, okay, well, we need to like double down here, and we need to go faster, and we need to go bigger. So I would say that. And then for a third one, I'm sure there are probably better answers to this, but I mean, like you could say, maybe the S&P 500 thing this week might actually be
that was huge.
Because that's like, I'm not a financial expert, but my understanding is that is really just, it sort of raises the floor for Tesla as a company from a financial perspective, where they're not on shaky ground anymore. It's not to say that Tesla couldn't fail. It certainly could if they screwed up enough and their products were bad or what have you. But that could end up being just such a pivotal. I mean, I could have said Battery Day, but the Battery Day stuff isn't real yet. So it's not that I believe it will all happen, but so I'll go with the S&P thing this week, because I really think that's just crucial for the long-term health of Tesla.
Fair enough. That's perfectly fair. So, since you've been in this game, you've mentioned a lot on many occasions, on the podcast and so forth, a lot of talk about the community. And you're no stranger to clubs. DeLorean had their clubs, and you guys had your club meetups. And so as you were, do you remember, how you heard about Tesla Owners of Silicon Valley and how you came to find out about the club and get involved in club activities?
Well, it was just, right at the beginning when the clubs were all just forming up. The San Francisco one that Rich heads up hadn't formed yet. And Silicon Valley was my neighborhood Tesla club. So it's like, I had, as you said, I had great experiences with my DeLorean clubs in the past, both in Arizona and then here in Northern California. And I was like, well, yeah, of course I want to join the Tesla owners of Silicon Valley group. I mean, absolutely. And because that's the fun part, the sharing of the enthusiasm. And I'm lucky. I get some of that back at me, like reflected back at me with the podcast, whether it's people calling in on the Ride the Lightning hotline or emailing me or tweeting me. But when you go to an owners club meetup, that's where you just can just nerd out with your like-minded enthusiasts and just you're all there because you love and you're enthusiastic about this same shared thing. And it's just there. I've never been to a Tesla owners club event that wasn't awesomely fun, because it's not only just you're sharing this thing together, but a thing I love about Tesla, and I mean, I confess I don't, other than DeLorean, those are the only two car clubs I have experiences with, but it's not I mean, just look at this Zoom call. It is any gender, any race, any ethnicity, any age. Tesla spans everybody. It has their own it's not just like rich, middle-aged, balding white men that are driving which is like kind of the stereotype of certain other, car clubs or car brands. It's like, I mean, I love that it's just such a diverse group, which DeLorean was like that too, which is largely because of Back to the Future. Like, everybody loves that movie, and you'd get the same thing largely at the DeLorean stuff. But I love that about Tesla, is you can come at it as a parent who is just like, you came at it because the cars are safe, but you've found that they're just super fun, and maybe you like the video games in the cars. Or you can come at it as a pure performance car enthusiast. You can come at it from a hypermiling, eco green perspective of like, I'm getting, I once did, I mean, like, was it Casey Spencer, who now works at Tesla? He had set the hypermiling record. I interviewed him on the podcast a couple of years ago. He'd gotten on a 90D, I think it was, Model S. He'd gotten like 500 miles or something on real roads, not on like a little like pretend course. Like, so there's so many paths into the Tesla verse that I love that, and it just appeals to so many people of all walks of life.
Oh, absolutely, 100% agree. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation with us, giving us an insight into where you started, how far you've come, and where you are today. Of course, I think all of us, I speak on behalf on all of the Tesla owners of Silicon Valley, we've all gained a lot of insight from you, from your enthusiasm, for your love of the product, and your podcast, of course. And so we can't thank you enough. Thank you for joining us on this podcast.